Hello and welcome. I'm very happy to start the session, Birds of the Feather session from this committee, which will be conducted by Anita and Brian from the this committee. So great to have you here. And as it is Birds of the Feather, which is interactive session, at some point, I hope that you will have a great discussion with the participants. And just a friendly reminder that as a participant, if you would like to speak in the session, please raise your hand, and then I will be allowed to enter you to the stage, so you will be able to have your voice and camera on the stage. Okay, without any further ado, I will just share the slides, and Anita, Brian, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Camila. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our session. So, this topic actually stemmed from an issue that I had at a conference, and I thought it's worth discussing. And so, maybe it might not be what you hope to listen to, but I would like us to collectively find solutions to the problems and the question: how do we create access for those who don't show up in our spaces? And a lot of times when we're in open source, we hear people say open source is about inclusion and accessibility. But while that is the case, so many persons are still not included or implicitly excluded from our spaces by our actions, by our projects, by a lot of times even community efforts, right? And so we're going to be looking at that um, individually and collectively as a group. My name is Anita Ihuman, and I am a developer advocate and technical writer. And I'll be joined by Brian Kai. Hi, Brian. Would you like to do a quick intro?
Yes, yes. Hi, Anita, and hi, everyone. Thank you, Camila. Thank you, Camila, for this, and thank you, Anita, for the introduction. This topic is also so close to me. I also came to be interested in this topic at a conference. It said in 2023 at JangoCon Africa that was happened in Zanzibar, and this year at JangoCon Africa that happened still in Arusha. When we were at JangoCon Africa in Zanzibar, mostly I focused on persons with disabilities. How could we get folks with disabilities more involved in open source? And I even gave a talk about this at the event. And most of the feedback I was getting, we had a couple of attendees with disabilities at the event, and most of the feedback was around, okay, some of us do not even have access to these opportunities. Like, I do not even have access to the event. I do not even have access. I cannot even open a website to get a ticket for this event. I had someone to help me out. And during JangoCon Africa this year, we had some folks attending from Francophone countries. And I was having like a one-on-one conversation with one of the attendees about how my session was and how everything is. And one of the things I noticed, like the attendee couldn't, I was speaking so fast. And the attendee, I could feel that the attendee was struggling to get me. And I was like, okay, I don't know if you're able to understand, like, okay, you're speaking so fast and English is not my first language. So I'm really struggling to get you because I'm trying to pair a single word you say, then understand everything. So I was like, okay, I've never thought about this. What about when I was actually on stage delivering my talk? I wasn't aware of maybe there's some folks who are multilingual and English is not their first language. And I also experienced this like this month. I was in Ethiopia also judging and helping at a conference in Addis Ababa. And the same happened. Most of folks are multilingual and they would easily switch between Amharic and English. So now this brings this up on how do we create access for those who don't show up in our spaces. Just a little bit introduction about myself. I am a data scientist and technical writer. I'm also a lover of open source. I contribute to several open source projects, including Chaos Project Africa, and also at NamFocus, where I help with the DISC committee. So when this comes up, for someone like me who has a chance to sit maybe and influence some policies, or has a chance to maybe speak to some of the folks, it really boils down into getting to meet the needs of these different community members, and that is why we are here. As organizers or as leads, we cannot have it all. We cannot think about it all from end to end. That's why it's more of always a discussion. Let's look at how we can accommodate you, because the needs for folks in sub-Saharan Africa might be different from the needs for folks in North Africa, different from folks even in West Africa itself and East Africa. The needs might be different. So we would love to welcome you to this conversation on how do you think we can create access for those who do not show up in our spaces. Yep.
The next. Okay. So oftentimes when we are in open source spaces, like I said, you're going to hear sentences like, oh, our community is welcoming and very much open, and or we are very inclusive and diverse. But I think when we say that, one of the things that I often prompt myself is, um, if it is so open and so inclusive and so diverse, why are there some people that are not included? And so diversity as a whole, when we're talking about diversity, people say how many persons are included, or how many persons have a seat, or how many persons are in the room. But I'd like to actually think of diversity as how many persons have we not included in this space, or how many persons have we exempted from this space because of one bias or another, or because of an implicit action or another. And so when we talk about diversity, and during this session, I like us to think about diversity from this point of view. How many persons are not included, and not how many persons are included from the various demographics, from the various differences, and all of that, right? And when I'm saying our spaces, we're talking about our communities, our company leadership pipelines, our meetups and our events. We're talking about developer conferences, our community channels, Slack, Discord. We're talking about our projects, the features and the functionalities, and how people are able to leverage on all of these things. A quick story just to get us um, more involved in this topic. Recently I was using a payment platform, and the thing with most of these fintech payment platforms that are coming up now, a form of authentication that they do is they expect you to use your phone and then put it right in your face to scan your face, right? And a lot of them ask you to blink or to smile, or to just open your teeth and tilt your head. So those are really great features because it's good for identification. However, I saw somebody who had whose face was disfigured, unfortunately due to a fire, and as a result, she didn't have one of her eyes, and so she couldn't smile like usual because half of the face was not able to move. And like the applications would expect you to smile and blink your eyes and all of that. So I was so curious, how are you able to use these payment platforms as somebody with this particular disability, which is situational? She wasn't born with this disability, right? But unfortunately she finds herself in this situation. She cannot use this particular, and she did mention that she has not been able to use most of these payment platforms. She has to like stick with the conventional banking systems that we use, because whenever she signs up for this, she's expected to blink or smile, and her face does not kind of permit that. And so I'd like us to just think a moment and imagine how many other people are in this particular situation, or in this particular person's situation. How many of our projects today are in situations like this, where one person who might be disadvantaged in one way or another is unable to be in this place or use a particular thing we're building. And when we're talking about open source, we're talking about projects that can be utilized and also distributed by literally anyone and everyone, right? But if our projects have this particular function that already inhibits not one but like a lot of people, what happens to our communities that still have these same issues or this particular challenges. And I think we all share stories like this, but I'd like to hear, Brian, do you have a story similar to this as well?
Yes, I have a story. I have a story similar to the same. So such a story is what actually led us to do what we did with Chaos Project Outreach in Africa, in Lagos, Nigeria. So when we were looking at all the working groups at Chaos Project Africa, we were trying to see, okay, we want to do, it's almost like Oktoberfest, or it's almost like all these initiatives you're having. We want to see how can we get more persons with disabilities to actually come on board and actually work on this project. But then we noticed who we want to even reach out to is not even on Slack. They are not even aware that we have a Slack channel. Whoever we want to invite on board to come and contribute to our project, they are not on board as part of our community members at Kiosk Project. So that's what now I think that resonates heavily in. It's not about who is in the room, because for most of us, we are passionate about this. We advocate for this. We try and get as much folks, as much resources to help more folks get into the space. But from that analysis now, so we're like, okay, let's try and do an outreach to reach out to persons with disabilities. We said, okay, with this outreach, we might not be able to do it in the whole of Africa. Let's start with a pilot in Lagos, Nigeria. And one of the things is when we were interacting with those attendees, it's when our eyes were being opened, like, oh my God, we had never thought about this. Because, for example, we had speakers who were delivering recorded talks. Like they were not able to make it to Lagos, Nigeria for that. So we had them either record their talk or give their talk live. And now when we were there, it's like, okay, some of the people actually need to have closed captions for these talks that are recorded for them to be able to follow along. Or some of them need to follow along in a different way. And that we also had hands-on code lab. And I was so shocked that actually more than half of the room were able to follow a hands-on session on and code lab that was happening. And probably would always assume that no, something that's not possible, or no, we cannot achieve this, but yes, it's possible. So let's look outside. The possibilities are always endless, and let's have diversity. People about it from outside the room and not really inside the room, while also having those who are in the room be part of those that drive that initiative.
Awesome. All right. Camilla, can we go to the next slide, please? So to get us engaged and also participate in this, we've put together some guiding questions. And if you can see your screen, all of this is listed out here. My first question is, what are the visible and invisible barriers to participation in your space, either a community or your event, that you have noticed maybe once or twice? And I'd like us to take the liberty to request like our mic access. If you are also not able to do that or not comfortable doing that, we have an interactive board which we're going to be which I would like us to drop some of our thoughts and in line with these issues that we're going to be looking at. Camilla, if you can, please share the link in the chat. Okay, I hope everyone can access the link in question. So it's a Canva link, and what we're going to quickly do is, based on these guiding questions, the first, which is, what are visible and invisible barriers to participation? Whose perspective are often underrepresented in the space that you're in? And based on these questions, I'd like us to quickly write down under the identifying the issues section in each of these boards. There, I have categorized them into structural barriers, into cultural barriers, into social barriers, into and then the non-categorized barriers that you have noticed. So based on these questions, I like us to drop some of the things and issues that we have noticed that are inhibiting people from being in our spaces. And also, how do time zone, internet access, our project features, the travel costs, the language barriers, and all of that, how does it impact engagement in communities? and how does it exclude people from our spaces? And then the fourth question is, what role is our community's culture playing in inclusion or in exclusion? But I would like us to start with the first, which is, what are the visible and invisible barriers to participation? So now, moving to this board, you can quickly, based on each of the questions, drop the issues that you have noticed, whether it is structural, whether it is um, cultural, whether it is social. Please indicate an issue that you have noticed, or a place where you've noticed somebody excluded, or a group of people excluded in your community, and what you think must have prompted that. But I'd like us to just quickly look at this and then drop it down in the chat. And if you have a question regards to that as well, I would be happy to take it. So if you didn't understand, I'll go over that again. Based on the questions that have been displayed, I like us to answer or list out some of the issues that we have noticed in our spaces that could be inhibiting other people from participating. So, whatever category it is that you think this issue falls into, just highlight it, mention it there in the boxes, and then we'll come back later to discuss how we can fix some of these issues that we have.
You can also easily make a copy of a card in case you feel like maybe most of the cards have been written on. You could easily just make a copy of the card, of any card, and then try and jot something inside it. And also, if you feel like maybe, as Anita mentioned, if you feel like you can't categorize it in any of these, just feel free to just drop it in non-categorized. Feel free to share it under non-categorized. Also, maybe if you're having trouble, maybe accessing the board, I don't know if maybe Camila, you're in a position to share the board on the screen, and then maybe if you can drop your comments in the chat section so that we can add them to the board. That would also help. Our goal is we want to get as many people as possible put their contributions in. So yes. Oh, okay. I think I just saw your comment, Ethan. You're mentioning that it's just you here as a non-presenter. Okay. It's still fine. We would still love to I'm seeing you're already having some activity on the board. Love that.
What we also can do for smoothness of conversation, I can create speakers like I can convert Ethan. I convert them to speaker if you would like to. So that might be easier. So Ethan, let me know if you would like to be on stage. Okay, maybe we can start with the points which we already have.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I think we can go on with like the points that we have so far. All right, so the first one, which is the structural barriers, and while we're discussing, please feel free to also drop in your points if you have any ideas or thoughts while this is going on. The first one in the structural barriers, I listed that most contributors are eager to participate in conferences, but they often can't afford the travel costs for some of these events. And even when they are able to like maybe get sponsorship or support, when it comes to like the visa application process, the contributors are left stranded. And I like to say that because my first years in open source, right, I did get travel support from the conference that invited me to speak. However, during the application process, the conference didn't make efforts to either give a supporting letter or extend some form of support to just show. And I say this because there are countries that their visa application process requires someone from the inviting conference or country to just advocate for these people. And a little bit of effort from some conferences would go a long way. Like I'd say the Linux Foundation, for instance. I think the Linux Foundation is a very big community. And for most people attending these conferences, it would be fair to actually extend um, some hand to advocate for people. And I'm just using this as an instance, but like there's so many other conferences that I've had these similar issues with, and I try to reach out and say if there's any possibility to, just indicate that you know me and you're inviting me to this country so that the money that I'm spending on the visa application process doesn't go to waste, but I end up not getting that support. And so I personally think this is a restriction that not a lot of people know it exists, but I think would help so many attendees if there is that support. And I don't know if any other person here shares in that thought as well, but I'd like to hear your opinions on this as well. Anybody had a similar issue or experience with this?
So for this committee, for the UN conference, which we organized in Brazil, the visa issue it was a big part of the struggle for some participants. And basically, there is a blog post on No Focus Medium around good practices about visa application. Definitely, there is much more to be done, but maybe that would be a good start. From organization perspective, it's also just having that in mind and remember about this issue to be addressed in the organization process during planning, especially like planning much in advance, having all the information which will be needed for the visa and so on in advance, like half a year or even more. That's crucial. So that's one of the issues which unfortunately it, yeah it's stopping many contributors to come physically to conferences. Um, Always some idea to just not ideal, but something. If already you know that your participants could not attend, there is usually there is an option of hybrid attendees for hybrid attendees. So it's not ideal because then like speakers doesn't our participant doesn't have a full access to the conference, and it has some kind of feeling a little bit of left out very often. However, again, building this online spaces at the conference in which folks online can attend, then that might be some kind of helpful, like a backup plan. And the other thing, then if you have this online spaces, then the other thing would be to make this online spaces accessible. So there is another layer into that. I might share this blog post from No Focus, which might give some light on the issue of visa.
Thank you so much for that. And I completely agree that it's a huge hindrance, but I love to see more events and maybe major organizations, open source organizations, work towards this. But I'm looking forward to that article, Camila. Okay, so on to the next point. Um so Ethan points that Ethan, I think I'd like to hear you talk more on this personally because it is your story. So I'd like to hear you, just share your light on it. We have more persons joining. So if you're just getting in, we're doing a quick interactive discussion on how do we create access for those who don't show up in our spaces. And we have an interactive board that we're looking at. That's what you're seeing on the screen right now. We're basically just identifying areas that our communities may be implicitly hindering other people from participating, or our projects may be hindering other people from leveraging it. And so we're just putting down our thoughts and also discussing this. And I'll share the link again in the chat so you can also join in. Yeah, so Ethan, would you mind pointing, like explaining your point? So for those that are joining the board now, you can pick any of these boards and write down an issue that you think your community has had, that or a particular way that you think people are not entering your, like is standing as an inhibitor from people entering your community, anything that you think affects people's participation, engagement, and involvement in your community, that it's not, maybe or may not be intentional, but you think is worth addressing. So any of these that you think is standing as an inhibitor, whether it is affecting the visible or the invisible participation. We looked at some of our examples, like the travel barrier that so many people have. But if you also have other thoughts in terms of the costing, the infrastructure that your project is using, whatever it is that may stand as a limitation within your community, you can drop it down in any of these boxes, and then we'll discuss it and also look at solutions to that we can use towards fixing some of these challenges as well.
I believe that Ethan Day doesn't have an access to mic, so
Yeah, so I completely agree that that is a really, so just to Ethan's point, and for those that are just getting in, I'd like to give you more context. I did give an instance that there's so many fintech applications that we have today that require you to use your phone to scan for facial identification. And it often expects you to blink your eyes or smile or tilt your head. And apparently, I met someone who was recently in an accident and half of her face got disfigured. And so it made me prompt the question, are you able to use any payments platform today? Because, like, how are you able to interact with these apps? And to my disappointment, she did mention that she has not been able to use most of the payment apps that she had before, because they require her to do this facial recognition. And right now, half of her face, she doesn't have the eye, so she can't actually blink. And so it can't even scan the eyes like usual. Her mouth, half of her mouth, like she can't smile or grin. And so when the app requests her to smile, she's unable to do all of that. And so like, that's just more context on Ethan's point. And I definitely think it's a huge barrier for the office, especially if they don't have an alternative for people that may be going through any form of disability that makes it unable for them to, like, use these facial scans. I think there should be considerations for alternatives, but I'd like to hear other people's points on this when we move to solutions that we can use for this. And I did drop another point under the social barriers. And to my point, so many communities that I have seen recently do not put onboarding as an essential aspect of community building. And so they create Discord channels and then start to promote their communities, and then put on a bunch of information in their documentation, right? And just leave it as it is. So it makes it really difficult for a newbie, and I'm saying this because I've been in like the beginner phase when I entered the community, and I was really excited about the project and ways to contribute. But it turns out they had an entire documentation that they shared to every beginner to just go over. However, I was actually intimidated, and I was struggling with like information overload because there was so much to learn from, there was so much to go over. I didn't know where to begin because the documentation did not clearly state out any beginner flow workflow for me to go through. It was just the documentation. And sadly, I didn't contribute or continue my contributions to this community. I had to just shy away from it because it felt like I was not knowledgeable enough and I was not capable enough to be in a particular space like that, because I didn't know how to understand or digest the information that I had received from the community. And this is a problem that so many beginners today are struggling with. They want to be part of something that matters to them, or something that they feel excited about, but our communities, or some of our communities, are not really defining onboarding in a way that makes them feel welcome or like they belong in some of our spaces. And I don't know if any other person shares the similar experience. Are you in a community, and is this also going on? And how is your community tackling this particular issue? Also, you can drop your comment in the chat if you have any thoughts on this. And moving on to another point that I did highlight under the cultural bias barriers. And I did mention that when it comes to leadership, some of our communities struggle with like inclusive participation. We try to make our spaces inclusive. And so when we're talking about like, let's make our leadership diverse, you see people say, oh, we need more females, or we need more colored people, or we need more Asians, or we need one person from this particular category. But a lot of times there are also other people in the community that are doing great work that may be on an entry level but have a lot to contribute. And I do feel like while it is good for sustainability, it's also good for giving people a chance to learn from the experts in the field, in order to like continue what is being done in that particular space. And there are also beginners that are doing great work, but most communities don't often identify or recognize them enough to put them in positions of leadership, so they end up just being beginners all through their phase in that community, until they realize that they've outgrown that space and just leave the community. And they really don't have anything to point to that they benefited, or the impact that the community had in their lives or in their career based on their participation during that time. But I do think uh, this is an issue that I have noticed with some communities. And maybe you have, or maybe you have not noticed it in yours, but it would be good to give it a thought for a second, and ask the persons that are in leadership in your community, the members that are in leadership in your community, how long have they been there? How long ago was there a shuffle towards leadership? And how long ago has it been since somebody who is new but also doing awesome work was given a head start, or just the chance to show what they're capable of as a leader? And I want to know, do you have any thoughts on this? Are there any areas in your community that you've also observed this?
I just
Anita?
would like to comment that sorry, both actually both points are very interesting, and we have this conversation second time. The last time it was more than 1 month ago, and it's great to see new perspective and new points here. One comment to the previous point about onboarding. It's very interesting point, and actually having this balance between having too much documentation and having not enough good documentation. Because from my perspective, I definitely have seen like both. Like one, it's being overwhelmed with so much documentation that it's very hard to digest. Maybe nowadays AI tools can help with that. Just to summarize, however, still it might be very intimidating, and very often there is a need to learn some uh, more specific concepts, and that just basically takes time. And from the other hand, like communities which doesn't have enough context, enough information, just there is a space, and yeah, you can play with that. And the argument for that kind of onboarding is like there is a freedom, and people can just use this freedom. However, um, it might be intimidating because it's hard to say what to do. It's hard to say what kind of cultural norms are in this community, and actually what's possible. In that kind of case, I definitely encourage you to always ask questions and also always be proactive. However, yeah, what I'm trying to say that it seems like too much of information might be an issue, and too not enough information might be also an issue. Um,
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes finding the balance can be a struggle, but I also agree that recently AI tools make it easy for people to, digest some of this. But I think our communities should look for ways to leverage AI tools within the documentation as a means to shorten the onboarding flow for people. I don't know how, but I think there should be a way to do that. Okay, so I think these are the points that we have so far. But if you also have any other discussion or any other issue that you have seen in your community, please feel free to use the link, the board link, and drop it there. Or you can also request access to the mic. And so, moving on to the next section, which is brainstorming how to like create access strategies. I know we've talked about a couple of issues, a couple of problems, and all of that. But the essence of this discussion is to hear our individual thoughts on what we think or how we think we can solve some of these challenges that we're facing today in our communities, right? And so, if you look by the right, if you're on the board right now, you should see three questions. So you can write your name on under the attendees section, and then to the right there are three questions. The first is, how do we design our communities or our events to reach out to people? So we're going to go over these questions individually, but I'd like us to just drop our thoughts on the various ways that we can design our communities or our events to reach out to people who aren't present or who aren't included in the room. Every thought counts at this point. So anything you have, anything you think that is worth implementing to make the process of inclusion a lot better within our communities, I love to hear it. You can drop it in the chat. It could be one list, two lists, whatever idea it is that you think communities can use to improve the process for participation and inclusion.
we have only 8 minutes left, so maybe we can continue.
All right. So there are some interesting points that have been dropped in the solutions that we can work or put towards addressing some of these limitations, right? And so I'd like us to, take these discussion points from the issues that we've looked at to even the ones that we probably haven't discussed here, but you've thought about. I like us to think about it critically before, like after this section, and then ask yourself, is this an issue, and is there somebody in my community who is struggling with this? Like under the designs, how can we redesign our communities and our programs? There's so many thoughts on this, and I'll just briefly run through some of them. I did point that communities can actually plan onboarding flows or develop beginner roadmaps. I don't know how many persons have thought about this in their communities, but it would be a good have if there's like a roadmap for how to get to the project, or like go through the project from point A to point Z, like from 0 to 100, to understand the project or to deploy the project, whatever it is. It's good, it's good to assume everybody is a beginner, especially when it comes to a project that you're trying to get developers to use, or trying to get more people to, adopt into. It's better to assume every single person that is coming across that project is beginner or entry level. And so having a flow like this would help a lot. And that is just my thoughts. To Ethan's point, she says, I think the first step is to identify the group of people who aren't present, and then find individuals from these groups to have open conversations with them and their struggles. From there, you can find strategies to address this and prevent them from being that find strategies to address what is preventing them from being involved. And that's actually really really interesting, because so many persons are building projects that they want to be utilized by, you know the entire world and like globally, but you've not really thought about the thoughts or things that could be hindering people from using your software. And so having a quick survey, or maybe a chat, or a Q&A session with people just to get their opinions, might just be the solution to why your project is not getting enough adoption, or why it's having any limitations in usability, and even down to like communities. And Camilla's point, identify communities which are already in the area and collaborate on sharing knowledge, good practices, and organize events together. And this is so true, especially for some global events that, the travel limitation is there, and so many persons are unable to participate in. If it's such a hindrance to get people across the world to attend your event, how about you look for ways to create a regional chapters for that particular event, or regional groups for that particular event, so that the people in those other places that want to be involved in can also participate alongside. I really like the that angle. And so under the how can we bridge access gaps in our project, I highlighted one which I think is a very interesting point. When developers are like working on the infrastructure for our project, they should also consider the geographic limitations and also accessibility. And this is because there are some softwares that cannot be accessed from certain by people in certain regions, or certain countries, without the use of VPN. And these are like supposed open source projects, right? Which I think is worth considering, especially before you hit the deploy button on your project. Every community or every project that has a software that is expecting users to, adopt and get on some way, it would be worth considering that. And then Ethan mentioned that using creativity and having the discussion surrounding the gaps with a broad and diverse group of individuals. And this discussion that we're having here is an example of some of these. It's not a day-to-day thing that you hear people want to hear the challenges, or you see people want to hear the challenges that people are having, and also dissect it in a way on how it affects the community and all of that. So using methods like this to discuss some of these gaps, and within your community or with other people, it's also a good way to bridge these access gaps. And under what can we do to accommodate those who have been implicitly excluded. And Ethan pointed that we can identify them and reach out to them with care, which is really, really interesting because some people just assume if they are not here, then they don't want to be here. But that's not often the case because, like I said, if they're not in the room, there must be something that is making them not want to be in our spaces or in our rooms or be part of that. So, identify those people and reach out to them and ask with a lot more care why or what is stopping you from being a part of this particular program or being in this particular space, and how can we make the experience better for you. And hi for everyone that is just joining us. This was mostly an interactive session, and you can also go over some of these documents that we're looking at and drop your points in later. And Camilla's point, she says, make a list of communities and organizations that we don't collaborate yet. Reach out to them, and also communities in specific regions and all of that. Reach out to these communities and collaborate with them, which is also a good way to accommodate so many persons that have been excluded. I think Brian mentioned earlier that there are some communities that in Africa for around disability that were put together. So like having to collaborate with some of these communities will give you more insight into people that have been excluded and the challenges that they're having and how they feel excluded and how your projects can solve that as well. And so, like, these are really interesting points. I really love all of this. I'm going to put together most of this topic, hopefully, as soon as possible, and write a more detailed and concise article and share with the community. But for now, that is the highlight of this discussion. If you are just coming here, like I said, we're trying to go over the challenges that is maybe making people not want to be part of our communities, some of the restrictions that they're having, and how cultural, structural, and social barriers within our spaces are standing as a hindrance. And so, if you are looking at this particular document here and you also want to participate, we are out of time, however, but you can go over this and drop in any points that you think is an issue that could be stopping people from participating. Categorize them based on how you see them. Is it a cultural barrier? Is it a structural barrier? Write down the issues and then also drop down solutions that you think can be taken towards solving all of this. And I think that brings us to the end of this particular session. Thank you all so much for joining in.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Brian, for preparing this session. Let's continue the discussion on Discord, and also you can continue this discussion on the chat here on our meet. Once again, thank you. Thank you so much for preparing that, and the conversation is ongoing. Have a wonderful rest of the PyData Global and Impact Scholarship Program, and yeah, see you around. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.